Hey guys, thanks again for being a part of the quest. So a lot of times people ask the question, if there's a God, then why do bad things happen to good people? And I think it makes sense to ask that question for sure, but I had a friend of mine that would always counter that with another question, and I thought it was so amazing. You know, he would always say, well, if there wasn't a God, why would you care? And I thought, that's so genius. But it's true. I mean, why do we even care that bad things happen to good people? And just that alone points to the fact that there's a God, because a holy and a righteous and a caring God made us and put that into our hearts. But still, I get it. You know, people have the question. I think we can all agree that there's an awful lot of pain in the world, and that there are good and innocent people, unfortunately, that suffer. We have a prayer list at our church, and a lot of times on the prayer list, there are little kids on the prayer list that are fighting, you know, life-threatening illnesses like cancer and different things. And when you have a little girl on your prayer list and she's 3 years old and she's fighting for her life with cancer, honestly, it takes a toll. There have been times when to be honest with you, I've sat at my desk, and after having dealt with family after family after family, sometimes even in the same day, you get so overwhelmed, and I even get kind of choked up now. Sometimes I just lose it. I'm sitting at my desk and I'm like, I lose it. And I'm like, wow, this is heavy stuff. And sometimes it takes, well, not sometimes, every time it takes the power of God to be able to get you through that. I just think that the natural question sometimes for us to ask is, you know, if God has the power over all things, then why in the world would he allow this to happen? So there's this verse in Ephesians chapter 1 and verse number 11 that is just a great verse. I mean, they're all great verses, but when it comes to this context, Ephesians chapter 1 and verse number 11 tells us two very powerful things when it comes to, well, bad or good or whatever it is that happens in our lives. Ephesians 1:11 says this, furthermore, because we are united with Christ. And so this is talking about people who have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And honestly, that's the whole reason for the quest. The whole reason we're having this little study is because we want to bring people to a place where they're willing to enter into a relationship with Christ, because there's so many benefits to knowing him and having a relationship with him. One of those benefits is the Bible says that we have received an inheritance from God. And the reason I love that so much is because, you know, it talks about an inheritance in the past tense. It says you have received it. No matter what I go through in life, whether it's good or bad or whatever it may be the worst challenge that I've ever been through in my life. It may be the worst pain I have ever experienced in my life. And yet I know for a fact, because I have a relationship with Christ, that there is something so amazing, something so wonderful already reserved for me in heaven, something I have the ability to look forward to, even though I'm suffering, you know, on this earth. The second part of the verse basically says, you know, for he has chosen us in advance. And then it says, he makes everything work out according to his plan. That tells me that no matter what happens in my life, there's a plan. There's a purpose behind it. There's literally a purpose behind every pain. One pastor said one time, he said, God never wastes a hurt. Even though we are afraid of pain and we tend to want to run the other direction when it comes to pain, and I totally get that. I'm the same exact way. We also know deep in our hearts that the pain in our life that gets our attention when we're going in a wrong direction. It's the pain in our life that softens our hearts when, quite frankly, we have a closed mind to anybody and everybody that would come into our life to try to speak truth and help us in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it's the pain that, you know, softens us. And sometimes it's the pain that teaches us the most valuable lessons. There are lessons that you are going to learn in your life that you would have absolutely never learned had you not been through some pain. That little statement that we all say, and you see it on t-shirts and bumper stickers, is, you know, no pain, no gain, is so true. There are some things in the Bible that help me deal with all of this. And I just wanted to share them with you. The first thing is the realization that we live in a sinful world. We do. It is a fact. All you have to do is watch the evening news. You know, all you have to do is pick up a newspaper, which people don't do anymore. We live in a world that is completely and totally filled with sin. And the Bible teaches us exactly what sin brings. Sin brings death. Sometimes in a world filled with sin, it feels like we live in a world surrounded by death. And that sounds pretty negative, but all it does is re-emphasize the fact that we live in an evil world. One of the things that I've learned in life is that there is nothing positive that comes from a sinful choice. Nothing at all, because sin brings death. It may bring physical death. It may bring spiritual death. It may bring the death of a relationship, or the death of a desire, or the death of a reputation, or the death of a career. All I know is when we make a sinful choice, that starts this process, this genealogy of, inevitably results in death in some way, shape, or form. James chapter 1 and verse number 15 says this, "Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death." And the thing that stinks so much about that is there's so many innocent people that will in some way, shape, or form pay a price, a painful price, because of sinful decisions that other people make. They get caught in the crossfire a lot of times of a sinful choice that somebody else makes. And because of the fact that we live in a world that's filled with sin, at some point, suffering's gonna touch every single one of our lives. It's like, jumping in a pool and hoping you don't get wet. How in the world are you gonna do that? You're in an environment that's wet. You're gonna get wet. We're in an environment that's filled with sin, and sin brings death. And so eventually, somehow that environment is gonna touch us in a negative way. And a lot of times it impacts us in a very, very painful way. Fortunately, we have Jesus. Am I biased about Jesus? Yes. Am I a pastor? Yes. Am I a believer in Jesus and have Jesus in my life? Yes. Shame on me if I don't share that with other people, especially because of some of the things that it says about Jesus in the Bible. For instance, one of the greatest verses in the Bible that talk about the reason why Jesus came to earth in the first place is Matthew 1:21. I call it a Christmas verse. It's a Christmas verse. Basically what it says is, it says she, Mary, is going to have a son, Jesus. You're going to call his name Jesus because he's going to save his people from their sins. I mean, that's like awesome. And the reason that's so amazing is because Jesus, in a sense, came to save us from the very things that cause so much pain and discomfort and suffering in our lives. He's the one that came to save us from the source of all that pain. He's the one that came literally to give us life. In one phrase, in one sentence, it says that sin brings death. Well, Jesus came to give life. He's the greatest antidote, really the only antidote to the pain and the sickness and the suffering that sin brings into our life, because he came to conquer it. And he came to set us free from sin. The second thing is this: God's perspective is much bigger than ours. I always say God sees the past, present, and future all at the same time, and we see this. We see hardly anything when God allows us to go through some kind of a painful situation and we find ourselves on our knees begging him. I am begging you, God, to take this away. I'm begging you to take this pain away. And God doesn't take it away. Sometimes we feel like he's turned his back on us, or he has failed us in some way, shape, or form. But what we fail to realize is that he sees everything. He sees the future. He sees the benefit to the pain that he allows into our life and the way it benefits us in the future. He's seeing it all. Really, all we can do is trust him. And there are a lot of people out there that say, I'm sorry, but I'm not at a place where I can trust yet. There are some people that even have a difficult time trusting anyway. But if you read verses like Romans 8:28, it says, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. The only way you can benefit from a verse like that is to believe it. The only way you can benefit from a verse like that is to actually trust, that God has the power to work everything in our lives in some way, shape, or form for our good. And God has the power to take an evil and a painful thing and turn it into a good and a productive thing. We're just not always able to see it. To trust him instead of blaming him, to trust him instead of getting angry with him. I always think about Joseph. Most people know about Joseph in the Bible and everything that he went through. I mean, he got betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, falsely imprisoned, forgotten about in prison. And yet God had a plan for every single one of those challenges that he went through in his life. God saw the entire perspective. Joseph didn't Literally, the only thing that Joseph could do while he was incarcerated and forgotten about was trust God. The only thing that he could do when he was falsely accused was trust God. He didn't see, oh, well, somehow some good's gonna happen. He probably didn't even think it. But I can guarantee you this, he trusted the one that was in control, and he continued to believe in and follow and trust. I mean, even when he was in Potiphar's house, what did he say to Potiphar's wife? He said, how could I do this to somebody who has entrusted me with so much? And then he said, why would I sin against my God? Why would I do that? I mean, that was always on the forefront of his mind. His relationship with his God and the way he was living his life, even in the worst of times, knew by a fact. And he was able to trust God through the challenges that somehow God would turn it into something good. And of course he did. When Joseph had the opportunity to confront his brothers, his brothers were scared to death thinking that he was going to do something awful to them. But this is what he said in Genesis 50 and verse 20. He said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people. God actually had the power to use the hatred, and the bad intentions of Joseph's brothers to save the lives of countless people. And so I'm telling you right now, you can put your faith in him. I'm telling you right now, even if you're going through a time right now that is awful, that you can hold on to him and you can believe in him and you can trust in him, because he will not fail you. And he does have the power to take that horrible thing and turn it into good. I say it at Park Valley all the time, if you've ever been connected with our church. But out of the 789,650 words in the Bible, I think God's just trying to teach us two, and that's trust me. With every verse, with every story, with every chapter, with every parable, with every book, with every truth that he gives us in his word, he says, Barry, will you trust me? In my own personal life, there have been times when I've gone through some tough times for sure. I can also say that God has showed up time and time again in faithfulness to me. When I've doubted him, sometimes I just, check myself, and I basically say something to the effect of, why do I doubt him when in 55 years of my life, he's done nothing but come through for me? Literally nothing but come through for me. There are times I thought he didn't, but, maybe later on in life I saw what he was trying to do and what he was trying to accomplish. He saw it in advance and I didn't. Third and last thing is this: he will give us the grace to get through whatever we go through. He will. There are people out there that always say that God will never give you more than you can handle. And I always say, I'm not trying to be negative Nelly, or whatever, but there are times that God will give you more than you can handle. And the reason for that is because he wants to teach you that you can depend on the one who can handle it. He wants to show you and prove to you that he has the power to handle anything that comes into your life, even the things you can't handle. And I think that's one of the reasons why when God made us, he made us with this natural inclination to reach out to him. I've said it so many times, but when you go on YouTube and you see people, doing videos of tragedies, of tornadoes or wrecks or whatever that are happening right in front of them, all you can hear them saying is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. They're literally yelling it on the video. That's all they say almost. I mean, not all they say, but most of what they say. And the reason for that is because we have this natural thing inside of us to reach out to the person who's in control when we're in a situation that's out of our own control. God built that into us, to yell, oh my God, in a moment of crisis. He has the power to get us through things that we don't have the power to get through. And he has the power to give us the grace to do that and the strength to be able to do that. I'm telling you right now, he will. Not only does he have the ability to turn our pain into gain, but obviously he can give us the strength to be able to get through it. So there's all kinds of definitions of the word grace, right? But I love this definition of the word grace. It's defined this way: it's the divine influence on the heart that brings you to a place of gratitude or thankfulness. I'm like, are you kidding me? How does God get me through some of the most challenging times in my life? By his divine power influencing my heart to give me gratitude and thankfulness in the middle of that challenging time. That's one of the ways that he does it. And we all know about Paul the Apostle, probably the most famous apostle in the Bible. He was going through an extremely painful time in his life, and it was so painful that 3 times he begged God to take it away. He said, God, I'm begging you, take it away. Please take it away. Please take it away. Please take it away 3 times. Every single time God responded the same exact way, basically with no. I'm not going to take it away. And then he basically said this in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8 and 9. He says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But this is what the Lord said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And then Paul said, therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That's one of those things in life that you have to experience to really, really know. That's what Paul experienced and wrote for us, that God's grace was sufficient to get him through some of the worst and most challenging times that he had ever been through in his life. And we learn from other scriptures that God has the power to turn all of that in some way, shape, or form, as evil as it seems, into something good, into something profitable. And that our goal and our role through the entire thing is just to trust him through it. We all know that it's the challenges that in life that grow us the most. And it's the pain in life that gives us the opportunity to experience the faithfulness of God. You want to experience the faithfulness of God? Well, most of the time it comes through a challenge or some kind of pain in your life. It's the difficulties in life that increase our influence a lot of times too in the lives of other people. The difficulties that we go through, that God comforts us, then equips us to be able to comfort other people who go through the same exact thing. And God literally says that. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse number 4 says, God comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort others. When they're troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort that God has given us. So, do bad things happen to good people? Yeah, they do. Bad things happen to really everybody. But God has never and will never, I believe, take his eyes off of you. And he is always busily working in your life when it comes to drawing you to himself. And sometimes it's the painful times of life that open our eyes, and it's the challenging times in life that cause us to open up our eyes to follow him and seek him. So many times people will come to our church and they will say, the reason I came here is because I got divorced. The reason I came here is because I was addicted to alcohol. The reason I came here is because I was going through an intense pain and I needed it. I needed help. And finally, we get people to understand and believe that it was through the circumstances that they were going through, really, that God was just using to draw them to himself. I'm glad they came to Park Valley, but it wasn't necessarily about our church. It was about them being drawn to a relationship with a God who loves them, and he will use the pain to do it. He will use a challenge, but I'm telling you, he'll never ever take his eyes off of you. So sometimes he allows pain in the process, but I'm going to tell you, he'll always use it for good, and he'll give us the strength to be able to get through it.